Hey everyone, and welcome to the Cheyenne Hills Podcast, Verse by Verse. We know it's often hard to find time to spend studying God's Word, so we're happy you can join us as we read, unpack, and discuss Scripture every Tuesday and Thursday. We hope you enjoy the program.
Across the street and around the world, Cheyenne Hills.
Welcome. I'm René Minder. I'm the executive minister here at Cheyenne Hills Church, and we are back in Genesis for our podcast. Today, we want to welcome back Ken Will. He's been on vacation. We're glad to have him back.
Thanks.
And we also have with us Tiffany Erickson, who is our children's director. And so we're going to do a verse by verse here and get in on Genesis. And if you remember, we have seen Jacob. He left Laban. There was some gods that they were looking for, and he has separated himself from his father-in-law. And then as he looks to face his brother Esau, he has sent these gifts ahead to try to appease him. And where we find Jacob today is in Genesis 32:22, where he is alone at night. So if you want to read our verses for us.
Okay, I will. In the context of, him under massive stress. I mean, it's like, here comes my brother with 400 people, and this is not a welcome wagon that's coming. It's probably a take us out. Anyway, Genesis 32, verse 22. Now he arose the same night and took his 2 wives and his 2 maids and his 11 children and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them and sent them across the stream, and he sent across whatever he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And when he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. And then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he, which is Jacob, said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him and said, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been preserved." Now the sun rose upon him just as he crossed over Penuel, and he was limping on his thigh. Therefore to this day the sons of Israel do not eat the sinew of the hip that is in the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of Jacob's thigh in the sinew of the hip.
Great passage. So when I was looking at this, I was thinking about how I grew up watching old Westerns.
Okay.
And if they're sleeping alone around the fire, I mean, they usually have a weapon or something to protect them. So I was kind of like, wow, Jacob allowed this man to come into camp. I mean, and they began a wrestling match. And tell us what you think about the wrestling match, Ken.
It's rather strange because it's so extended. I mean, Tiffany was talking earlier about wrestling and how long usually matches are. And I did wrestle in high school, and there it was 6-minute matches. And I tell you, by the end of the 6 minutes, it was like pretty exhausted. But here he wrestles all night. Did you want to elaborate on?
Yeah. Oh, I was just thinking about just the extreme like range of motion and just the muscle that is involved in sort of those extreme positions and things like that. When you're wrestling, it's just such a different, it's not pedestrian. It's not the way that our bodies are necessarily designed to move in long periods of time, but rather it's just that, that intense, like I said, the range of motion just kind of sticks out to me. But then also, the strategy sort of, I don't know if you ever came away and kind of re-strategized and just some of those things when my husband was a wrestler and just kind of knowing some of those interesting, they would sit in a lock and kind of strategize and figure out where could be a weak spot and then, switch positions or trying to make a move or try to gain some ground and things like that. So just mentally and physically an exhausting night, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. So we see here that it says they call him a man, but when we look at kind of when we look at the Hebrew, they're saying that it was more than a man, right?
Yeah, especially when it comes to the part where Jacob's been struggling with this guy, and it's kind of an evenly matched conflict, and then suddenly the guy touches his hip and he's immobilized. I mean, pretty much would be.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this is not a typical human being.
There's something else at play. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and scholars and theologians have really looked at this and said this is probably what's called a Christophany, which is a appearance of Christ before the incarnation that happened in the New Testament, but where it actually Christ took on bodily form and interacted with people. In certain limited, restricted times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
what's striking me as you're saying that is just the emotional setup of this is just such angst, and like I could just imagine, like he's just eaten a lot. He's trying to protect his family. He's going back on the command of God, like return, and just trying to be obedient to that, but knowing he's coming into something that could be just a horrible face of having to meet something that he did in a previous part of his life, and having to own that and face whatever that looked like. And I know I would be just emotionally in a jumble, and like just it would be so almost a welcome relief to have some sort of physical exertion of that like mounding emotion, and so to have Jesus show up and wrestle this out with you, because this is a big thing, and I hear your heart and I feel your heart, and let's get down to working that through.
Well, and as you're saying that, I know that sometimes when I've been faced with fear or big changes, that often I go into a wrestling match with God, in prayer or in discussion of God, what's this going to look like? I need a touch from you. I need to know you're with me. I've been through those wrestling matches, not physically, but just emotionally and spiritually of just talking it out with God. And I was laughing the other day when I was thinking about this, because I knew we were coming up on this passage. It's like me, this little ant trying to wrestle with Superman. I mean, of course, who's going to win?
Yeah.
But it's almost like I have to get to the end of myself so that I can say, not my will, but your will. And so that's how, when I look at this, and apply this to my life personally, we do have wrestling matches when we're faced with something big, and we need God to show up, and it's almost like we've got to come to the end of ourselves so that we can just submit. And so I read something where someone said, I don't trust anyone who doesn't walk with a limp, meaning all of us, at some point have wrestled with God and we walk with a limp because we're just not capable, and we need his guidance and his power.
Yeah. I think so oftentimes we pray, God, make my way easy, make this happen so that everything will be nice, and, keep us safe and whatever. And yet God allows us, and lots of times it's like, God, why did you allow this to happen? But to bring us to the end of ourselves so that we're like Jacob, and it's like, I don't know what else to do. And God shows up, and there's the conflict, but we have to, not that we have to but fortunately God wins.
Yes.
That God always wins. But he's just bringing us to the end of ourselves.
Right.
Because Ken likes to really trust in what Ken can do until Ken gets to the end of himself on this. Like,
okay. You've exhausted all the resources, right? It's like, and in this case, it's like mental resources, physical resources, emotionally, we're just every bit of what we would have, just gets depleted. And then you're hanging on the victor in this wrestling match, with a dislocated hip, not able to stand by myself. I'm going to cling to this other person. And just with nothing else to give and be held up by that other person. So that's kind of an interesting image and picture.
Mm-hmm. And commentator has pointed out that where he says the dawn is breaking and his, let me see, how does it say it exactly? About, I mean, somebody might say, well, is he like a vampire where he can't be there when the day breaks? But the commentator made the point that he wasn't going to let him see his face because the face of God is a dangerous thing to see. And so that's why he's like, dawn is breaking and he's going to depart. But
Oh, that's interesting.
Jacob asked for a blessing. Yeah, some of the things in here are a little bit cryptic, and it's like, what's this about? Dawn's breaking and I don't see my face. I mean, are you a vampire or something? But it's not that at all.
It is. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting where, this man decides to dislocate his hip. And, in a lot of wrestling stuff, like I could see a shoulder, going out or something, but the hip is a really stable joint and it's so central to so many muscle groups. So you've got like your core from the front and the back are kind of connecting into that hip socket, all the muscle, the quad, the glute, the hamstrings, the IT band, all of those connection points are there in that hip socket. And just how incredible to just kind of go thunk. And, like you said, to touch back, circle back to what you said, there's something else at play here. Cause that's to dislocate a hip like that. First of all, you would have to be applying a great deal of force in your physical self against the other person to be able to kind of, cause something like that. Yeah. But this is very specific that says, no, he inflicted that on Jacob. And then Jacob stands up and it's not as if it was a shoulder and he could go about his day and nobody knew what happened, but it's a physical representation and everybody knows this battle that he just kind of had and moves forward walking with a limp. So
I also like here that the man asked, what is your name? Which, thinking that this is Jesus. Jesus knows his name and he says, I'm Jacob. And he says, no longer will you be Jacob, but you will be called Israel. So this battle that goes on is really changing Jacob, changing the future of Jacob into Israel, which is just astounding.
Yeah, and it becomes the national identity. You know, it's like, it's not called the nation of Jacob, it's called the nation of Israel now from that point on. So.
Yeah. So this is, I've just loved this passage forever. Anything else you guys see in this that we need to cover?
I just love that he won't release him till he blesses him. And I just think of, I almost return to memories of being a little kid and, when you go through something kind of big and hard and you're battling it out or whatever. And you just you want your mom to say, it's okay, I forgive you or whatever. And it's like, I can't let this go until you tell me that. But there's been this, he is completely depleted and completely, at the end of himself and all his resources are used up. And it's like, now all I need is that blessing. At the end of the day, he doesn't need to win. He
needs to know that he's blessed.
Yep.
Yes, he needs to know
something.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a great place to stop. And just knowing that all of us can feel that at times, whether we're wrestling or not, but we just want God to bless us. So, all right. Well, thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time.